Tonight, circus justice.
Why you act like a lady? Why you act like a woman?
Trump's criminal trial starts today. Can they find a fair jury in New York?
Nothing like this has ever happened before. There's never been anything like it. I'm very proud to be here.
Did he really fall asleep in court? And what about the politics?
You support him for president, even if he's convicted in classified documents. You support him for president, even though you believe he contributed to an insurrection.
Yeah, me and 51% of America.
Counterattack. Israel says they will defy the White House and hit Iran. How Mr. Biden caving to domestic radicals only makes things worse. Bill O'Reilly on Biden's path out of political quicksand. Butchered.
4 people that committed an absolutely brutal crime.
Police find 2 moms who disappeared in rural Oklahoma going to pick up their kids. Why a group of vigilantes allegedly hunted them down, and how police hunted the hunters. And deplorable by any other name.
Anti-intellectualism and elitism is what is driving many of these anti-establishment, which are Trump voters.
Katie Couric, remember her? The former morning show anchor speaks for her friends in New York. Why understanding traditional America isn't that hard. Major breaking news as we come on the air tonight, 2 a.m. in Jerusalem, where the Israeli war cabinet has met and understood to have authorized a strike of some type in the coming days on Iran. 7 p.m. here in Washington, where neither our allies nor enemies appear all that concerned with what President Biden has to say. And in New York, the former president is on trial amid protests in that city supporting terrorists. Welcome to the Ferris Show on television. First tonight, we start in Washington with a president paralyzed. President Biden's problem is pretty clear this Monday. Nobody is listening to him, neither overseas nor here at home. Not our friends, the Israelis, not our enemies, the Iranians, nor really are the American people. And of course, he is president, but he's lost the president's most important power, the power to persuade.
Stop walking, put your head behind your back.
Across America, pro-Palestinian groups shut down access to America's biggest airports, including Chicago O'Hare. They shut down the Brooklyn Bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge as well. A few dozen people, 100 at most in certain cities, completely paralyzed America's biggest cities. It's wild. And their chants sound a lot like those of Hamas and Hezbollah and the Ayatollah. In New York, video showed some carrying Hezbollah's flag, that is a terrorist organization, through the streets of New York. President Biden's problems overseas come from his problems here at home. He's paralyzed by domestic political problems. The left of his party is revolting, and he doesn't know what to do. Democrats right now are counting on the start of today's trial in New York for President Trump to fix their problems. They believe a Trump conviction, or at the very least, nonstop media coverage of his criminal trial will change the hearts and minds of voters everywhere. Trump reportedly fell asleep in court today. That's the New York Times reporting. Who knows? We are weeks away from having a jury. They threw out half of the jurors' questioned today because they said they couldn't be impartial. They haven't even started questioning people individually. The judge threatened Trump with jail time if he didn't show up for court every day. It was a wild day in court. Former president wasted no time today attacking the district attorney who brought the case against him and the judge who was presiding over it.
We got a real problem with this judge. We have a real problem with a lot of things having to do with this trial, including the DA, because you go right outside and people are being mugged and killed all day long, and he's sitting here all day with about 10 or 12 prosecutors over nothing.
Bill O'Reilly hosted the No Spin News on BillO'Reilly.com. His new book is out in September, Confronting the President's No Spin Assessments from Washington to Biden. Bill, always good to see you. Welcome back from Malta. Read your column. It was fascinating. Sounds like a good trip. Can the trial of Donald Trump save Joe Biden?
I can't speculate on that. What I'd like to do tonight on NewsNation, Leland, with your permission, of course, is just go over a few facts. I'm so tired of the partisan analysis of this Trump trial. It's just annoying and corrupt. So let's just stay in the zone of reality. The genesis of this is a woman who allegedly had an affair with Donald Trump. That woman wanted money shortly before the 2016 vote to keep quiet. What would you label that? Some would say it's extortion, blackmail. That is the genesis of the case. Apparently, money did find its way to the woman, Stormy Daniels. Okay, now that has happened 10 million times in the United States since the turn of the 20th century, maybe 20 million times. The difference here, and this is again factual, is that the prosecutor is alleging this had something to do with the election of 16. But he hasn't, Alvin Bragg, told the jury, the defense, or the American people what exactly the crime is. Did you know that? We don't know what the crime is because just giving somebody money and masking it in a business sense is a misdemeanor. There has to be a felony, and there are 34 felony counts. What are they? You remember the famous press conference with Alvin Bragg saying, I don't have to tell you. And he still hasn't told us. I submit to you, this is in fact, this is an opinion, that very few jurisdictions in the United States would have brought this case. Maybe D.C., maybe California. That's it. Okay. Then we have the federal judge, the federal apparatus, I should say. The Justice Department refused to bring a case against Trump. The U.S. attorney in the Southern District said, no, I'm not going to bring the case. So if Trump violated federal election law, certainly they would have brought the case. No, it's a local case. Again, we don't know what the felony crime allegedly is. We don't know. That in itself will overturn whatever happens on appeal, but appeal will be after the election this year. Then you have the judge, Juan Marcon. Okay. Openly Democratic, gave money to the Democratic Party. His daughter is a progressive activist. The right and fair and just thing to do was for Judge Marcon to recuse himself. If I was a judge and Joe Biden was brought before me, I would recuse myself because I'm on the record saying I don't think Joe Biden is a good president. And I shouldn't preside over anything that he does. And Marcon should have done that. And finally, there's no way that Donald Trump gets a fair trial in New York City. Everybody knows that. There's no way. This is going to be tilted against him. Stuff's going to be said, objections overruled. You know the drill. So this is harmful to the entire country, to our democracy. It's a travesty. It should never happen.
Okay. Some of the things I think reasonable people could agree you laid out were facts. Some are opinions that I think a lot of people would agree with as well. Will the facts, though, matter?
Yeah, what facts are they, Leland?
No, the facts that you just laid out about the judge, about the case, about that this really is not.
They matter.
I understand they should matter. Are they going to matter politically, though?
I don't know. Who knows? I mean, look, you got Joe Biden now. If you watched him today with the president of Iraq, he could not even have a conversation. The man's incapable of having a conversation. He had to read stuff off cards in the middle of him talking to the president of Iraq. Come on. Any citizen casting a ballot for this man, I can't even fathom it.
Okay, but hold on, Bill. Look,
gone.
Bill, you and I covered, obviously, you at The Factor, covered the 2016 race. Okay? And there was an enormous amount of scorn given to Trump voters. How could anyone vote for this man? They're all deplorables, on and on and on and on. But the type of language you just used about voters for Joe Biden is pretty similar. How could anybody vote for him? Isn't that the same mistake Democrats made about Republicans?
Scorn is fine. Scorn is protected under the First Amendment. You want to scorn me and many have, fine. You have a perfect right to do that. But when you see day in and day out the President of the United States incapable of even having dialogue with another head of state, he has to read off cards. That is beyond worrisome. We're into a zone we have never been in, and I know all about Woodrow Wilson and his stroke, but this is 10 times that.
Good point.
So I don't know if Americans are going to allow a trial in New York City that's a kangaroo situation, and I'm sorry to use the cliche, affect their vote when the opposition is as discombobulated as it is.
Fair points all around. The protests that we're seeing now, it's one thing for people to be anti-war. Obviously, you lived through that in the 60s. I did not. But it's a different thing than being pro-Hamas and pro-Hezbollah and chanting about hands off Iran. Big arrests in New York City, in Chicago. The police let the highway get shut down, keeping people from getting to the airport. And the like. The flip side of the sort of chaos that was in major cities was what happened in Miami. This put out by Governor DeSantis's communications chief. Take a look. All right, arrested, charged with felonies for blocking streets. Does this kind of disorder, and you've talked about this before, the feeling of things getting out of control, is that going to be a problem through this summer? And I don't have to remind people, but I will, that this summer the Democrats are going to all meet in Chicago.
Okay, so this protest is not what it seems to be. In Vietnam, that was organic, as the wind chime people say. It was, people felt the Vietnam War was wrong, and they went out to demonstrate their concern about that. This is contrived. These people are largely socialist anarchists, and there are groups that are very well funded, they make money doing it, that blast out emails, be it the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge, be it the Brooklyn Bridge, be here, block traffic. It's directed. Now, Leland, if you and I were to go down tomorrow to one of these protests and ask the protesters, who was the American president when Israel was founded? How many right answers do you think we would get?
None.
Well, we might get one or two, but it would be 90% would look at you like, what? They don't know anything about Gaza or Israel or Iran. They are disruptors. They don't like the country. They want to cause trouble. The best shot was at the Golden Gate Bridge. You see it now. When the cops stood there, did nothing when 4 vehicles were parked across the bridge blocking traffic. The San Francisco PD should have had towers there, impounded the cars for the next 3 years, and anybody getting out of line should have been arrested a la Miami. They did not. In New York City, those protesters will not be prosecuted by our pal Alvin Bragg. He'll just, they'll be out, the charges will be dropped. That's the game. The anarchists know it.
Yeah, well, Bragg's a little busy these days, as we pointed out at the top of the show. Mr. O'Reilly, good to see you as always. Right. Thank you. One more thing.
All right? Did you see the Saturday Night Live thing on NewsNation?
You mean the spoofed town hall? Yes.
Yes.
Well, I didn't see it live because I was working, but I did see it.
Okay, so I saw it, and it was funny. But the Beavis and Butthead characters, did they not look like Cuomo and Abrams? That's the first thing I saw. I said, man, they nailed it. Anyway, props to NewsNation. You make SNL. I was on the program.
You make SNL, you've made it.
You have. That's right.
We're here. All right. Yeah, feel free to spoof us anytime. We'll talk to you soon, Bill. Thank you. Take a good look at this video. We wanted to put it back up. The flag of Hezbollah, a terrorist group that's killed hundreds, if not thousands of Americans. They're waving it in the streets of New York. Senator Joni Ernst on whether just defending Israel, the other side of this, is enough.
But the president's been very clear. We don't seek a war with Iran. We're not looking for escalation here. We will continue to help Israel defend itself.
And court documents show the murder of two moms on a custody visit in deep rural Oklahoma looks like a planned ambush. Why a group calling themselves God's Misfits targeted the pair. Yes, God's Misfits, now accused of murder. How they stalked their victims when we come back.
His karate lessons might not turn him into a black belt. Hi-ya! And even after band camp, he might not be the greatest musician. But with the 3% annual percentage yield you can earn on a PenFed premium online savings account, your goal of supporting his dreams...
Thanks for everything, Mom and Dad.
...will always be worth it. Apply today at PenFed.org/savings. Federally insured by NCUA. $5 minimum to open account. To receive any advertised product, you must become a member of PenFed.
PenFed's got great rates for everyone.
Mom. Mommy. Mom.
This Mother's Day, celebrate the working moms.
You're a real woman of the 80s.
The stay-at-home moms.
So, Mom, what's for dinner?
And every mom in between.
That is terrific.
Celebrate the day with a mom who does it all, Elise Keaton, with a full day of family ties.
Oh, it'll be nice.
Mother's Day at the Keatons. All day, May 12th on Antenna TV. Go to antennatv.tv to check your local listings.
If someone you know is using drugs or alcohol more often, in larger amounts, or for longer than intended, it might be a sign they have a substance use disorder. Hi, I'm Dr. Griffin Rogers, Director of the National Institute of Diabetes, Digestive, and Kidney Diseases at NIH. My colleague, Dr. Nora Volkow, Director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, explains.
Addiction can change the brain, including the areas that are needed for self-control, making it very hard for someone to quit, even if they want to. Substance use disorders can happen to anyone at any age. People with addiction might feel ashamed, fearful, or angry, and may not always tell the truth about their drug use. Treatment is available to people with substance use disorders, and those affected should be approached with high-quality care and with compassion.
If you have questions or need help, call 1-800-622-HELP and follow us at NIDDK.gov. This is Dr. Griffin Rogers.
Thanks for listening to NewsNation on the Go. I'm Connell McShane, and this is America's source for engaging and unbiased news.
This message is from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Veterans, do you take medication? At VA, prescriptions have a range of copay levels, from free to $5, $8, or $11 for a 30-day prescription, depending on your eligibility. Refill by mail, in person, or on VA's mobile app. Sign up at va.gov or call 1-800-MyVA411.
In 1956, Mad Magazine had Alfred E. Newman run for president. The cartoon character's campaign slogan was, "What, me worry?" It was a reference to America in the Cold War. Today, the bomb is bigger than ever, and so is worry. Dr. Gary Probst here with a thought about you and the news in just a moment.
David was in big trouble with the IRS.
At first, I didn't owe that much, but after this year, it was out of control.
Then David called Get a Tax Lawyer.
Right away, they were like, "Oh yeah, looks like you're qualified to save."
Get a Tax Lawyer went to work.
Should have called way sooner.
Get a Tax Lawyer has helped thousands like David fight the IRS and get a fresh start.
Call 800-783-0798. That's 800-783-0798.
I spent quite a few years in television news as an investigative reporter, but for the past few decades I've watched a change from serious journalism to excessive use of breaking news, alerts, going live for no reason, tons of hype, all to keep you on edge and keep you watching. Now there are new networks that are trying to reverse that trend, but anxiety from news is very high. Today we're flooded with spin and slant, social media, unverified sources, information all around us, and we worry about what's next? Don't let the media cause that. We're all still here. Reconsider what really impacts your life. Breaking news, we're all just fine.
Live picture of Jerusalem, 2:20 in the morning. At least from the Israeli side, they believe the Iranian attacks for the moment are over. Israel says it will defy President Biden and attack Iran. That attack could still come tonight in the Middle East or in the coming days, possibly a cyber attack as well. President Biden tonight faces a problem. Even one Democratic senator right now is saying he should be doing more for Israel.
I think it really demonstrates how it's astonishing that we are not standing firmly with Israel, and there should never be any kinds of conditions on all that. When a nation can launch hundreds of drones towards Israel, and I'm not going to be talking about conditions ever.
With us now, Senator Joni Ernst, member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Nice to see you, ma'am. We appreciate it. You've heard from the White House over and over and over again that we will continue to help Israel defend itself. Is that enough?
Well, Leland, thank you very much for having me. I do think that we need to be stepping up and helping as much as possible for Israel. So in the short term, whatever Israel decides to do militarily, there are things that we can do. One is getting the supplemental package over the finish line to make sure they have the munitions and the platforms necessary to defend themselves. But going beyond that, we also can support them logistically. We can support with targeting operations, whatever have you. We need to be there for our closest friend and ally in the Middle East. For the long term, what we need to do as the United States of America is making sure that Iran does not have the revenue stream to continue building and buying these drones and ballistic missiles. And that means we need to step up and enforce the oil sanctions that we have against Iran. We need to make sure we are cutting them off. We are choking the funds out so they cannot not sustain what they are doing to Israel, as well as targeting American troops in the region.
Now, look, fair enough to say that when there were severe sanctions on them, and when the United States had not made the deals of the Biden administration, they couldn't afford to export terror in the way that they can now, because they simply didn't have the money. I want to unpack a little bit of your first answer. You said there is more we can do. Again, the White House keeps saying, and let's play John Kirby, we do not seek a war.
Whether and how the Israelis will respond, that's going to be up to them. We understand that and respect that. But the president's been very clear. We don't seek a war with Iran. We're not looking for escalation here. We will continue to help Israel defend itself.
We're not looking for escalation here. We continue to help Israel to defend itself. So I'd put it back just to put a finer point on this. We haven't said we're going to help them with targeting information. We haven't said that we're going to help them logistically. We haven't said that we would help them with air refueling. If, for example, Israeli F-15s were headed to bomb the Iranian nuclear facilities. Are you willing to say the U.S. military should go that far if asked by Israel?
Well, I think Israel will not ask that, actually, Leland. And Israel has been very adamant about taking out their enemies on their own. But I do believe that we have a role to play, and we will continue to develop that in the upcoming hours, days, perhaps even weeks, as they decide what retaliation to take against Iran.
I'm wondering what you see as the risks of President Biden's don't to Iran and now effectively don't to Israel going unheeded.
I think the Arab nations are coming together to support Israel, partly because of the Abraham Accords that were secured in the last administration, and partly because they don't see the United stepping up into the role that we should be playing around the globe. President Biden is weak, and is not doing any good to support Israel. All this don't stuff, it obviously is not working.
Just to bring this back to domestic policy, which I think sort of matters here in a weird intersectional way. We've seen over time that Israel is most likely to show great restraint when they have lockstep support from the United States and from the administration. I'm wondering why such a simple concept and that has long historical evidence, be it George H.W. Bush in the 90s, Clinton bringing Oslo to the forefront, the Bush attempts at a peace deal, whatever it is, when Israel is supported by the United States, they tend to listen better. Why don't you think President Biden is taking a page out of that playbook?
Well, he should, but I'm not sure who is advising him on the inside on these matters. But obviously, President Biden is very weak-kneed. He talks about escalation, whether it's in Ukraine, whether it's Israel, you name it, perhaps even when Taiwan rolls around. He's not standing up for American interests overseas and supporting our friends and allies. When he is not supporting friends and allies, those friends and allies have to rely on their own resources and do what they can to push back against the authoritarian regimes that are trying to disrupt their peaceful civil societies. So we have got to be a better friend and partner to our friends and partners, those that have stood with us through the decades, through the global war on terror, etc. And President Joe Biden seems absolutely incapable of demonstrating such leadership.
All right. Senator, thank you very much. We appreciate your time. We'll let you get to votes, ma'am.
You bet. Thanks, Leland.
Prospective jurors in Trump's New York trial are asked to raise their hands if they didn't think they could be fair and impartial. Half the hands in court go up. Is this proof, as the president says, that he can't get a fair trial?
As you know, my son is graduating from high school, and it looks like the judge will not let me go through the graduation of my son, who's worked very, very hard. He's a great student, and I'm very proud of the fact that he did so well.
Put a blood mouth. Put this. Put that in my mouth. Put it in your mouth. Put it in your.
Well, chaos outside and inside the Manhattan courthouse, where Donald Trump's first criminal trial is getting underway. 150 of President Trump's supporters protested the start of his hush money case. It could last up to 8 weeks. That's at a minimum. The political world obviously is all talking about this. Politico points out that we are not going to hear any substantive arguments, actually testimony, what the case is about, what Donald Trump allegedly did, because it's going to only meet for 7 days in the entire month of April. On 2 of those days, court will adjourn early. You know, all days are likely to be consumed by jury selection. So we probably won't even get opening arguments until May. Tom Dupree is with us, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General under President George W. Bush. I thought this was interesting. They brought in, about 100 jurors for the first, sort of selection process. Hey, can any of you be fair and impartial? Can you not be fair and impartial? Half said they couldn't be fair and impartial, which I never heard of a number that high. My question is this: how do you keep people off the jury who just want to be there so they can write a book?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And the answer is you can't always. You can certainly ask all sorts of questions to try to smoke them out, to confirm that they truly can be impartial and that they're looking to serve on the jury for legitimate reasons. But at the end of the day, there's not really any way you can enforce it. But look, this process is moving slowly. As you note, and as the jury, Politico and others have noted, we're not going to see testimony for a while. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but keep in mind, jury selection is really a very, very critical part of all of this. And you can win and lose trials based on the jurors you select. So although it can put you to sleep, and although it's going to consume days and days for the next week or two, it's critically important and can ultimately determine whether or not former President Trump is found guilty or acquitted.
Right. Look, all he needs is one juror, right, to hold out, and he can walk out of the courthouse steps and declare his success in overcoming the thing. 500 candidates will be vetted, 100 at a time, 12 jurors, 6 alternates. Chosen is going to be how it works. Juror comments: many of the prospective jurors stretched their necks to get a look at Trump once in their seats. One woman in the second row giggled, covered her mouth, raised her eyebrows at a neighbor. Okay. How, going forward, right, do we separate the politics in the theater of court from what is a criminal case? And Bill O'Reilly was on earlier, who pointed out that in many ways what Alvin Bragg is alleging Donald Trump did, we don't quite understand. There's a lot of indictment on the promise of getting Donald Trump for something here.
Yeah, and look, that's a real challenge, frankly, that Alvin Bragg is going to have in this case. It can be a complicated case. And when you're talking about putting forward what could be very dense evidence before jurors over the period of 6 to 8 weeks, you can't put them to sleep. You're going to have to capture their attention. And so I think the DA and his team of prosecutors are really going to have to make an effort to digest this case, to make it understandable to the jurors, to put it in plain English, and to really tell a story that captivates their attention. Because if they lose these jurors on, day 3 or 4 of the trial, it's going to backfire in the end. They have a real tough job ahead of them.
Which is sort of surprising, right? Because this does involve a porn star sex with a man who was married, who became president in a payoff tour, and somehow we're talking about how this case is going to be boring?
Well, that's the thing. There certainly are very interesting aspects to it that I think will capture the jurors' attention. But Bragg has got to prove these business records crimes. And so he's going to have to put before them various ledgers, accounting records. We're going to hear testimony from Michael Cohen, among others, about the purpose for payments. So although there is a lot of steamy stuff that will capture the jurors' attention, at the end of the day, Bragg has got to get a conviction here. And for that, he's going to have to put on business records and make his case.
Yeah, I'm still fascinated by just who would want to sit there for 8 weeks in this courtroom if you didn't really care one way or the other, either for Trump or against Trump, and there are going to be people who are for him, or if you didn't really care about writing a book or doing TV interviews, why you would want to sit there for 8 weeks. But I guess maybe you get to be part of history. Tom, it's good to see you. Thank you as always.
Thank you, Leland.
Yeah. You remember Katie Couric? She was around for a while. No more. She did the news at one point. Has a new deplorables line taken on the MAGA movement. Sage Steele joins us on why Katie Couric and some of her friends in New York still approach Trump voters like anthropologists. Has Katie Couric ever actually been out in the wild to be an anthropologist? Who think it's mostly good now under Joe Biden. That gives Trump a 17-point lead. And yet, rather than trying to understand what motivates them ahead of the election, America's elite are pulling a page right out of the 2016 playbook. Here's Katie Couric with Bill Maher on his podcast, Club Random.
The socioeconomic disparities are a lot, and class resentment is a lot, and anti-intellectualism and elitism is what is driving many of these anti-establishment, which are Trump voters, right, or anti-establishment voters.
America's elite literally can't understand why the rest of America doesn't love them, why the rest of America just doesn't listen to them. If only all of us would do what Katie Couric told us, we could have unicorns, pots of gold. Sage Steele is the host of the Sage Steele Show on Bill Maher's podcast network, Club Random Studios. She posted this photo of her and Donald Trump at a UFC event over the weekend. She writes in the caption, cue the divisive, close-minded thoughts and unfollows in 3, 2, 1. Sage joins us now. Nice to see you. Thank you. Take me back to 2016. Did you ever think you would have been taking a picture with Donald Trump at a UFC event?
Donald Trump, no, at the time. This is actually a month ago at the Miami UFC event. And the fact that he even won that election in 2016, I remember how I felt. And I was absolutely shocked, as I think most of America was. But I also think in hindsight, what was going through my mind that night was, wow, America really is tired of the crap and the swamp, as he likes to say, in Washington, D.C., and that's how desperate Americans were for a change, including myself in 2016. So, no, I never thought I would.
You said cue the unfollows, right? And I think you knew what was going to happen, and you knew a lot of people who you used to spend a lot of time with, I think fair to say, would deal with the photo that you posted. I'm wondering what makes you different than them, right? Because I think anybody a few years ago would have put you in the intellectual elite before your comments on COVID and other thoughts. And what makes you different than the group in Connecticut that you used to hang out with, that you seem to be willing to at least try to understand folks who are supporting Donald Trump, as opposed to being scornful of them as Katie Couric was?
You know what? I just was raised in such a diverse household with literally and figuratively. I mean, I come from an interracial family. My dad's black, my mom's white, and a military kid. We lived all over the world, and it was like we'd have Norwegians to the right and Turkish people to the left and didn't speak our language. And it was just a beautiful, diverse upbringing, and I didn't think about those things, and I didn't care what other people thought if we had different opinions as a kid, and certainly as an adult. The diversity of thought hashtag that I use for so many things, I really mean it, and that's only after, I mean, I've always believed in that, but after I got crushed and canceled a couple of times, and then you're like, wait a minute, the people canceling me are the same ones who are preaching tolerance and acceptance and love and all those things. So you get to a point, honestly, where you're like, okay, I don't care if you don't like me. I just think it should be a two-way street, and when people don't act that way or don't practice what they preach, I now call them out on it, and it feels kind of good. I think it's important.
It's interesting you say that, that it's not a two-way street, right? I think there is a sense of trying to understand by the right or by traditional value Americans, if you want to look at it in that sense, the left in America. But there's not the same desire to understand the right by the left or traditional values by progressive values. And one of the places this is really playing out, I think, is in the transgender debate, not so much about bathrooms, but about sports and men playing and teenage boys playing in women's sports. Another example, just over the past couple of days, video of a race where a transgender person, so a boy who was claiming to be a woman, came in second, didn't win, but clearly sort of totally disrupted, and you can see the vast difference in athleticism between this young man and the rest of the field. I'm wondering what it is you think about so many of America's elite, of the people who you used to consider friends, that they only have scorn and absolutely no desire to understand or to try and deal with, I think, what people would call some legitimate grievances.
With that topic in particular, I actually don't think it's anywhere close to the majority, even of liberals. Literally, I was at the Final Four a week or so ago in Phoenix, and I cannot tell you the number of people who came up to me, white, black, Asian, Hispanic, male, female, and just said, oh my gosh, thank you. Please keep pushing this topic. This is insanity. And many of them said, listen, I'm a liberal and I don't understand it. I think I saw a reputable poll a couple of weeks ago that said 79% of people in America polled believe that this should not be happening, that men and women's sports should be separate. This is not rocket science. I am not even close to a scientist. This is common sense. I guess I'm grateful, Leland, for my freedom right now to be able to speak up without fear of retribution, at least from an employer, because I'm working for myself now. I'm with Phil Maher, which, by the way, what a concept. Two people on different sides who can communicate and have a conversation, lead with kindness, but be polar opposites. That's where I think most Americans want to go, but we know over the last 3 years that has been the opposite of where we've been allowed to go.
Yeah, and I think, obviously, there's still a lot of pushback from that, a la Katie Couric. You can still call her the old guard, I guess. Sage, thank you very much. It was great having you.
By the way, can I just say real quick, I'm sorry, I love the way that they speak for all of us and say, how can they think this, or they must be this or that? Like, have you asked me? Are you speaking for me, for all people who think differently than you? Have a conversation. Don't just assume, and that's why I call them elites, right? Because they're assuming that they can speak for me based on my gender, my skin color. What is that? I would love to have a conversation with Katie Couric. Maybe she'll come on my show.
I'll moderate. Tell me when and where. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll let you know if we hear back from Katie Couric on that invitation. We should note, like many of the New York literati, Katie Couric once loved Donald Trump. She even dressed up as Donald Trump for Halloween. There is photographic evidence. She also attended Donald Trump's wedding at Mar-a-Lago almost 2 decades ago. There she is. Why did a group calling themselves God's Misfits apparently target, ambush, and kill the 2 moms who went missing in the Oklahoma Panhandle? Who is God's Misfits? When we come back. Authorities in Oklahoma believe they found the remains of the 2 missing moms, Jillian Kelly and Veronica Butler. They vanished on March 30th, traveling for a custody visit with one of the women's kids. The arrest warrants include a group of people, and the mugshots are pretty wild. Take a look. They were part of a group called God's Misfits. Tad Cullum, Cole Twombly, Cora Twombly, Tiffany Adams. Tiffany Adams is the grandmother of the children at the center of this case. They are accused of being part of that anti-government group called God's Misfits. How the group fits into this alleged attack is a little bit unclear. The 16-year-old daughter of Cora Twombly told authorities that she overheard the group planning what they called a mission around the planned visit of these two women. She said she heard the group discussing using burner phones and said on the day of the women's disappearance that she was told the mission didn't go as planned, but they wouldn't have to worry about Veronica Butler ever again. NewsNation correspondent Nancy Liu joins us now from Oklahoma. This seems even more planned and targeted than we ever really realized.
Yeah, there's a lot to unwrap here, Leland, and we learned a lot of new information today with the unsealing of the probable cause affidavits. We've learned that those bodies that were recovered over the weekend, they were recovered on private land that was leased by one of the suspects now behind bars, and those bodies were 8.5 miles from where those women were last spotted with the abandoned car. Now, as you mentioned, this is all linked to a bitter custody battle. At the heart of it, Tiffany Adams, the grandma of two kids, at the heart of this custody battle. I talked to the been 2 weeks of investigating night and day, so hats off to them. But take a listen to what the sheriff said, because from the get-go of this investigation, Leland, these women were targeted.
There was a lot of questions from the public as was there any danger to the public? And I think from the get-go, once we arrived on scene, that and we gained a little bit of information, that we felt this wasn't a random deal. All right. We felt that with some of the information coming in that it was more targeted, and we started to look in those areas that we were pointed to.
And Leland, you mentioned God's Misfits, and this is an government group. They view themselves as sovereign citizens who don't need to follow the laws of the land. And that may explain the military, almost military-like convoy that we saw exclusively on Saturday as they closed in to execute these arrest warrants. We saw a convoy of over 20 vehicles closing in on these suspects, and that's because there was a fear that perhaps there would be resistance to arrest, there might be a shootout. But we can tell you, Leland, that there was no resistance, and law enforcement tells me that none of those suspects were armed when they were taken into custody. Leland?
Nancy, incredible reporting. I think this is an affidavit that you just got. Twombly's 16-year-old daughter said she overheard the group conversations about Butler not protecting kids from brothers sexually abusing them. Obviously, there's no way to corroborate that. You talked about the burner phones. There's so many parts of this story. The God Misfits group, right? Was this a group that they sort of created in order to carry out this crime? Or were they sort of already part of God's Misfits, and then they decided that this was a mission they wanted to embark on?
The latter. God's Misfits is something that exists, and there are followers of that movement, not just here in Oklahoma. That just plays into, these 4 suspects, but there are other followers of God's Misfits. But law enforcement indicates, this was a plan allegedly hatched up by these 4 suspects, spearheaded allegedly by that grandmother, Tiffany Adams, who wanted custody of those grandkids, and Veronica Butler was fighting for custody. And Leland, Wednesday, there was supposed to be a court hearing in which Veronica Butler was planning to ask for full custody of those kids.
Wow. And the timing comes now full circle on this. You can imagine there's a lot of pretty crazy things that happen in the rural panhandle in the northern part of Oklahoma. Not all of them good, as we learned. Nancy, keep up the great reporting. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Tomorrow on Banfield, there is a mystery that has truly gripped America. What happened to Riley Strain? You can see Brian Enton sitting there. He sat down with the family. And Riley Strain, who disappeared from a bar in Nashville, his body was found miles away in the river, but there was no water in his lungs. He didn't have his cowboy boots on. He didn't have his wallet. The family is going to reveal what they really think happened. It's the interview that all the networks want. And you know this because Brian is the one who got it. Brian Enton tomorrow on Banfield, 10/9 Central. We'll preview a little bit more of this and why the case is really important. Also, you think about Nashville, Tennessee, music capital of the world, the city that's exploded, all the bars on Music Row. There is a lot of questions about what happened to Riley Strain and what it means possibly for everybody who visits Nashville. Tomorrow in War Notes, we're going to take a look at this. The very promised numbers are out for the movie Civil War. We'll follow the money at the box office. War Notes tomorrow, warnotes.com.